In the Likud for Likutei Sichos that came out for Parshas Hazinu at the end of Tovshin Lamed Dalet, and later on that Sicha, that Likud, was printed in Chelik Yud Dalet, page 148. So there the Rebbe talks about Birchas HaTorah, that we have to make a bracha before we learn Torah. And the Rebbe says there that the fact that we have a special posuk, a special limud to teach you that you have to make a Birchas HaTorah shows that the union of Birchas HaTorah is different than Birchas HaMitzvahs, than the bracha that we make on all mitzvahs. This is a special type of bracha. But in the Orah 6, the Rebbe says, Aval Eina Muchrach. It's not muchrach. You don't have to say it that way, because number one, you could say the reason why there's a special limud is because it's deraisa, while the other brachas are midarabanon. And the second thing, even according to those that hold that the Birchas HaTorah is midarabanon, but still they found an asmachte, a raya from a posuk. Why? Because this is a mitzvah Sheb'dibur. It's a mitzvah that we do by speaking. It's not the same like other mitzvahs which are done by Maaseh. And originally, when the Rebbe wrote this, he added these words: Ura'ei and look into the places where it discusses concerning making a bracha on a mitzvah that is bedibur, that is speaking. Now the people who were involved in praying the Sicheth thought that the Rebbe meant that look into different places where you'll see a discussion whether you have to make a bracha on a mitzvah that's just bedibur. So they wrote back to the Rebbe that we didn't find anywhere there should be a discussion whether you make a bracha on mitzvah Sheb'dibur. It's a milsa de pshita, it's a pasha de zach. We see we make a bracha on Sfiras HaEmer. They even quoted the Pri Megadim in Psicha Kilelis, where he says that if anybody would say that you don't make a bracha on the mitzvah sese, which is bedibur, zelei metzona, we don't find it. So what did the Rebbe mean when he writes Re'ei b'negeya brachas on the mitzvah Sheb'dibur? So the Rebbe answered in a few words, and he said he meant b'negeya birchas hamozon ukayetze b'sei. It doesn't mean that there's a discussion b'chlal whether we make a bracha on mitzvah Sheb'dibur. There are specific mitzvah Sheb'dibur that we don't. Birchas hamozon ukayetze b'sei, and therefore the Rebbe wrote when they wrote to the Rebbe leimatzonu shaklevatariya. We didn't find a discussion b'negeya lebracha on mitzvah Sheb'dibur concerning if you make a bracha on mitzvah Sheb'dibur. The Rebbe wrote lechapeseid. Look further. Benegeya ledivri admor azokin concerning the words of the Alter Rebbe she'ei mevorchen al birchas hamozon, that we don't make a bracha on benching. And the Rebbe wrote a maramokim hagode bitkilosei, because in the Rebbe's hagode take, not mamish the beginning but closer to the beginning, in the last Heitzah, it's page Tesvov, the Rebbe brings that the Alter Rebbe said that the reason we don't make a bracha and the mitzvah lesapri b'tzias Mitzrayim, to talk about Yitzias Mitzrayim Pesach night, just like we don't make a bracha on birchas hamozon. Before we bench, we don't make a bracha levorich birchas hamozon. Ashake the shona b'mitzvos b'tzavon levorich birchas hamozon. And the Maramokim there is the Sichas of the Friedrich Rebbe from Pesach Tofresh Tzadik Zayin. So the Rebbe he wrote, look further into this inyan. You'll see that there is such a thing as not making a bracha on birchas hamozon, and obviously he also meant what it says that you don't make a bracha sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim. And they wrote the Maramokim Haggadah Shel Pesach. But because the question was asked, the Rebbe added and changed the words. Instead of writing Ura'ei b'negeya lebracha mitzvah Sheb'dibur, the Rebbe wrote a whole arichas, as we see now in the Sicha and in Chelik Yud Dalet. The Rebbe added with this ksavya the whole arichas b'al derech she'ei mevorchen al mitzvahs birchas hamozon utfila, like we see when he said it's not the same a mitzvah bedibur, a mitzvah ma'aser, like we don't make a bracha on mitzvahs birchas hamozon, we don't make a bracha on davening. Then he goes into the ariches, but for krishma we do have birchas krishma, a bracha for krishma. So he brings the whole thing that it's not a bracha like a birchas hamitzvah. It's otherwise with the ha'orah. It's a big long thing that the Rebbe wrote. Instead of that, changed it instead of the words ura'ei b'negeya lebracha mitzvah Sheb'dibur. It's a very general word. And he meant only specific mitzvahs, but it was very nekudasdik, so here he added. But the pele is that when the Rebbe added this ha'orah, he did not bring the Maramokim from the Haggadah, where it brings the Alter Rebbe's teretz, why we don't make a bracha on Sipur B'tzias Mitzrayim, and he says, just like you don't make a bracha on birchas hamozon. And the Rebbe in the ha'orah doesn't quote it. But as an answer to the ones that wrote the Sichas, the Rebbe did write that Maramokim. When he said to look further, you'll see, he said, Haggadah b'tchilos, and here he didn't bring it. So we have to look into it, why he didn't bring it here.